Welcome, everybody. We're going to hear from Ian on the 10 lessons from analyzing 1 billion metadata items. Ian has been a Salesforce customer from 2002 and was a speaker at the first UK Dreamforce, which was marked 3 customers and 120 delegates. So way back. Since then, he has spoken at Dreamforce World Tour multiple times and has written 11 books on Salesforce, business analyst, change management, and compliance. So as you can see, Ian has a lot of experience, and I'm glad to introduce Ian to you all and to listen to all the things he has to say. Transition to you then, Ian. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Claudio. Yes, I'm delighted to be speaking at the Unite Summit. I need to correct Claudio. As I said, it's when we first wrote the article a while back, it was analysing 1 billion metadata items. Since then, our product management team took a look and we've analysed 7 billion metadata items. These 10 lessons, I want to boil down into 3 key trends for you in terms of what we're seeing out there, and put it in the context for you as partners, as SIs or as ISVs. So rather than you having to take photographs of slides as you go through, if you take a photograph of this picture or just scan it on your phone, it will take you to a page which gives you all the decks for both this and the previous session I ran, and also the links to all the resources that I'm going to refer to. And with all presentations for Salesforce, this is the safe harbor statement. Please make all purchasing decisions based on generally available technology and solutions. I'm not going to be talking about Salesforce technology, but again, it's important that we're aware of this safe harbor statement. So it's very clear, or it certainly has been over the last 20 years, of the meteoric rise of Salesforce. I can remember the very early days when it was 2 guys in a shared office in London, and Gartner said this thing will never work. We're now 20 years on. Salesforce is clearly strategic. It's a powerful no-code, low-code platform, and it's the single source of customer data for so many customers. In fact, I would say virtually every customer. And we've gone from what was a simple SFA, Salesforce automation application that I saw back in 2000, and it now covers pretty much every business unit, every business area, every industry area. And then if you think about the App Exchange, it's been massively extended to cover pretty much every use case you can think of. And that means that with that broader scope, it's not just Salesforce as an island, it is now integrated into so many other systems. I mean, Elements isn't a huge company, but our implementation has so many integrations. It has so many touch points into other systems. So any company, even a relatively small non-profit, within a couple of years is going to end up with a relatively sophisticated and powerful Salesforce implementation. And as partners, we all have to grow and grapple with that. So I said there are 10 lessons. I wanted to boil them down into 3 themes that we're seeing from analyzing all these metadata items. The first is we've been staggered by the scale and complexity of some of these orgs. And the plus side is Salesforce is very easy to build and configure. The downside is it's very easy to build and configure. And that scale and complexity increases risk. I was talking to a customer the other day who said that they've got an 18-year-old org. It's got to a point now where they can't make changes. And to do the tech debt refactoring, they estimate it's going to take 18 months. That's just unacceptable from a business perspective. And therefore, they have to look at options about how do they move forward? How do they get themselves out of that technical debt issue, which means that the power and flexibility of Salesforce has disappeared. The second is that, with that level of technical debt, we need X-ray vision into our org to understand the implications of making changes. And the scale of these orgs means we can't do that manually anymore with any confidence. But there are some amazing APIs that Salesforce has provided, the metadata API, the dependency API, tools API, which we can use as partners to extract the data and produce some great analysis, which is really where our analysis has come from. And the last is that so many orgs have a need to start to clean up certain areas of it, which is clearly an opportunity for partners. Now, you may go, that's very cynically, and the opportunity is to do more consulting work. But I want to come at it from a different perspective. The fact that customers are now looking at how do they clean up their org, how do they migrate from Classic to Lightning, is a chance to get the customer to go, let's rethink the power of what we've got here. And maybe when we come back, and instead of just fixing what we've currently got, let's come out with a better solution. Let's come out with a solution which is more flexible, something which will support us in a world where transformation means we have to change our business systems way, way more quickly, purely so that we can keep up with the way that the business marketplace is changing. So the benefit of all of this is agility. So let's look at each of these in turn. So first of all, the scale and complexity. I'm not going to read all these out, but if you start thinking about the size of some of the orgs that you have come across as a partner or as an ISV, 275 record types, 12 million lines of Apex code. By the way, all of it undocumented, and very little of it actually went through, managed to get code coverage. So we've got some very complex orgs out there, and I think in many cases customers don't realize how this is built up, how quickly it's built up. 60 managed packages, how many of those are really being used? Could we strip some of those out and massively reduce the complexity? And we come across this every single day. As I said, we're synchronizing and using the metadata API to pull out the metadata from, I was going to say hundreds, but it's probably thousands of orgs now. And we're trying to make, and now with the metadata APIs, we can make sense of how all of this hangs together. Which leads us to the next point, which is with that capability, we can now give you X-ray vision into the org. And with every consulting gig, the first thing, whether it's consulting or an ISV, the first has to be discovery. It's not acceptable to give a quote, go to the customer, start working, and 3 days later go, I said it was going to be 50 days. It's more like 80 days because I didn't realize you configured person accounts in a certain way. Or I didn't realize you'd implemented these 3 managed packages. Or you've got 60 lookup fields on a particular object, which we have to clean up first. It is possible now to understand what's in that org before you start doing the work. And I would encourage everyone to build into, whether it's a pre-sales activity, which we're seeing some companies doing, some SIs doing, or whether it's the first phase of the work, a piece of org discovery, which only needs to be a measure of days, but that org discovery means that you and the client can have a sensible conversation about how you move forward. So one of the things that we've been doing with customers, we've created an org assessment. Again, any one of you can get access to it. There'll be some links at the back end of this presentation in the resources. But 60 questions, and it will build this spider chart for you about org maturity. This is about how they implement. Now, this is really valuable. You can do it at the beginning of the implementation. It identifies areas that you need to work with the customer. You could do it at the end of the implementation and show how good the work you've done is. You could do it every 6 months and go back and do a health check so you can start to track the health of your customer against a set of dimensions, having something which is very tangible. The second, using the metadata APIs, you can pull out this sort of analysis. This happens to be how well populated every single field is. Now, how many customers do you go to where they say, I've got 500 fields on the account object and I can't do anything else with it? When very quickly we could discover that maybe 120 of them have no data. Combine that with the second API, which is understanding the dependencies of the fields, then you can understand whether you can delete them or whether they can be changed. There may be a very good reason why that field is empty. That field is used for end-of-year reconciliation, and we haven't filled it yet. So you can't necessarily delete fields just because they're empty. You need to combine a whole series of things. The metadata API, the dependency API, and maybe also documentation around the org to understand why we've created these fields, who's using it. But again, all of that can become visible using tools like Elements, but which is leveraging all those APIs. Another API that's just come out is the dependency API. This is not just where something is used from the first level, but way more powerful than that. This is starting to tell you the knock-on effect. So this field called earned value is being used by the custom field earned value burn down, which in time is looking at earned value peak. So here you can start to see the implications of making a change. This is useful for several perspectives. Number one, when the customer says, it can't be that hard to make a change, just change the field, you've got a very good visual representation about the complexity of and the risk of making that change. The second thing here is that if you're maybe making a change to one item and you didn't realize other things were implicated, you can now add that to the release, add that to the change set, make sure it's included within the analysis. And the third is that you can start to understand where there are opportunities to start to clean things up. We've got layouts here called, copy of applicant layout, 2019 applicant layout, applicant please delete. So again, this is giving a clear picture about maybe there are opportunities to do some cleanup as you're working through the analysis, as you're working through with the customer about the changes that need to be made. And the previous presentation, I was talking about the power of business analysis. Not for this conversation, but you need to make sure that you're doing sufficient analysis up front so you don't discover these changes or these risks in build, or worse, in production. These activities should be taking place in analysis when you're starting to do the work with the customer to understand what the requirements are, what the processes are, and then what the user stories are. And those user stories linked back to, these are the metadata items we need to go and change. So think of the power of connecting requirements, business processes, user stories, and then metadata with the metadata analysis. Suddenly you're getting a true X-ray vision of the org, but also of the changes that are happening to the org, because we're trying to build up a picture of the history here. So discovery is the first step. A really important point here is that it helps you identify the risk, but it also helps you prioritize the work you're going to do. And talking to another customer, another consulting firm with their customer, they were asked to go in and do a piece of org analysis work, and the job was, please can you merge two orgs? When they did the org discovery, they found that one of the orgs was War and Peace and the other was Dilbert. Impossible to merge the two orgs. It didn't make sense. So they changed the scope of what needed to be done to simplify the complex org and then use that as the basis to actually merge the other org into it. So again, it may change the prioritization of the activities the customer needs to do. You may identify quick wins when you're doing this analysis, when you've got this X-ray vision into the org. And then more importantly, you can make sure that you de-risk the project both for you, but more importantly for the customer. The other piece that comes out of this is that those APIs are giving you a level of automated documentation. I know nobody likes to document. I know you go into orgs and there is no documentation whatsoever, but the APIs will help you pull out a ton of documentation. So don't think of documentation as just things that you've written in a Word doc, but it's tell me what this field has got, these pick list items. Tell me where this field is used. Tell me where this dashboard, which reports feed the dashboard. All of that can be pulled from the APIs, and that essentially is documentation. Every time we link a user story to a metadata item, we're building up a history of why those changes were made. Really important word, why. I can probably look at an org and tell you what you did. The gold dust is, why did you do it? Why did you do it that way? What's in your mind? Attach the whiteboard photograph, a photograph of the whiteboard of how you designed this out to help me understand why you did it. So many times as consultants, you are walking into an org and you followed 2 other consulting firms or 3 other admins, particularly in the non-profit world where admins tend to cycle quite quickly. The ability to have an understanding about why people did things before you Now you need to pay this forward. If you are doing some work, you need to make sure you do some level of documentation to make sure that the consultant who comes in after you, whether it's someone else from your firm or another consultancy, has that documentation. That will massively increase the org analysis speed, and it will reduce the risks. So again, we're seeing very limited manual documentation out there, virtually none. I mean, people aren't even filling out description fields. I've got a personal campaign to see if we can make the description field mandatory. So at least people fill that out. People are happy to tweet about the fact they've created a new field. Why don't you tweet it into the description field and tell us why you did it? A little bit of my soul dies every time I see a Salesforce demo and they never ever fill out the description field. Just fill it out. Put 5 words. Tell me what you've done there. And more importantly, tell me why you've done it. And I talked about there's a cleanup opportunity here. I mean, technical debt kills agility. We're seeing that time and time and time again. But the point is, not all technical debt is bad. We need to pinpoint where our activities are. There is no way a customer is going to say, by all means, come in and spend the next 18 months cleaning up our org. They may go, we've got a real issue around, say, contact, because that's a critical object for us. We see case, again, is another area where multiple process workflows, tons of validation rules, a lot of fields on there. These are areas where you can focus the tech debt cleanup, but combine it with how can we make this better? Combine it with the business analysis of how we're going to change this to make it work better. And again, with the ability to dig in and really understand, okay, this particular process builder, it is triggered at this point. It's actually used this many times. Oh, we've now, as we've started to work out how it works, we've documented the overall flow and then attached it. Maybe it's just you've noted it down on a piece of paper and taken a photograph. That's better than nothing. You've done the discovery work. You've done the detective work. Let's link that to the metadata dictionary so then everyone else can benefit from it. So this forensic analysis reduces risk. Everyone needs to be Sherlock. The issue with most people is that they're very good at identifying what they found, but there's nowhere to write it down. And again, Salesforce is talking about you should build a metadata dictionary. Again, using the APIs, you can build those very quickly, because that's a place where you can start to document what you found and also document, this is the cleanup. Yeah, this field can be deleted. This field needs to be removed from a page layout. Don't delete it, but let's remove it from this page layout. Every field we get off a page layout increases user adoption, reduces the time that users spend on fields, reduces confusion. If the field's on a page layout, it should have help. If it isn't on the page layout, if it's on the page layout without help, then should it be removed, or should we add help? How do we drive it down so we have as few fields as possible to make it quick for end users? The last point there is a huge level of debate that we're seeing. Should we clean it up or should we throw away and start again? Throwing away and start again, it really is a big issue for the business. You think about the investment that gets lost. And I would always encourage people, if you can, to do this forensic analysis and understand what's the minimum cleanup you can do to start to get that agility back, and then get the confidence of the business that you can drive the changes to Salesforce at the speed that they need it. That nuclear option of starting again, I'm seeing it more and more, but we need to try and avoid that. We need to make sure that we've got some strategies as consultants to help customers avoid that, unless genuinely the org is such a mess, or that the business is so different from the way the org was built that we can build a second one in parallel and migrate. So when someone's asked the option, why avoid the option to rebuild? I think certainly some of the organizations I'm looking at, they have got such a level of business knowledge embedded in the way the org works that throwing that all away and starting again could be more costly. I think the issue is not whether you should do it or not do it is the fact that you haven't got any decent data to make that decision. People look at it and go, I've no idea what's on the org, let's throw it away and start again. And in many cases, you could have saved the patient. You could have actually fixed that org. So I think this forensic analysis will help you understand, should you clean up, should you start again? But we're talking to customers who've been implemented Salesforce 11 years ago. The level of business knowledge, the level of user training associated with that org is huge. So if we can clean it up behind the scenes and make it work better for the end user, then we all win. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, you are trying to answer the question to why avoided the option to review, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned a few things, but what else in terms of a complexity, or what else in terms of things that you saw over the time that would influence your approach in rebuild or clean up?
That's a great question. It's not just about what the number of process builder workflows, because I mean, having 60 process builder workflows may be the right answer. If you're a large organization, having 60 may be the wrong answer. I think you need to start almost from the ground up and go, okay, let's understand what business processes we think the customer now has, and then does the system support it? If there is a massive difference, massive delta, then maybe we should be rebuilding, because the business has moved on so much in terms of the way the business process works, particularly driven by COVID, where everyone's been driven online. Maybe the scale of the business or the way the business works may be so different that actually moving from where you are to where you need to get to, it may be quicker to start again. That's the first thing. The second thing is architectural. You've built a single-story house, and you always intended to have a single-story house, and suddenly you want to put 2 more floors on. It may be easy to knock it down and start again. So if the system has been architected based on, not necessarily it's been architected badly, but because the requirements when it was first built have changed so dramatically that the architecture that you're using, or maybe it's some major managed packages that you're now going to put in because they support an industry, then maybe that's the other reason that you should start again. So it's not just about all complexity. I think it's also about how the business was structured, and then how Salesforce was initially architected.
Yeah,
and can benefit from new functionality.
No, thank you. Those are great points. Thank you.
We've got a few minutes left, so I want to give you a few takeaways, but also give you some practical actions. I think I often listen to presentations and I leave inspired, but I actually want to know what I'm meant to go and do next. So some takeaways, first of all, clearly Salesforce is strategic. No matter how small or large the customer, we need to apply the level of discipline and rigor that Salesforce now depends on and expects. Secondly, the complexity of orgs can now kill agility. It slows things down, and it increases risk. And what we're saying is that the scale of these orgs means you've got to do a level of analysis. You need to take advantage of the APIs out there to rather than trying to do things manually with spreadsheets. And the last piece, which again is slightly harder to get customers to buy into, analysis and documentation shouldn't be an afterthought. Getting a customer to understand that every hour you spend in business analysis could save you 5 hours in rework, and the fact that you are asking more questions and not building more applications actually will support them in the long run. You need to spend more time with customers helping them understand that. And secondly, that they need to pay for documentation, because that will help them in the long run in terms of reducing technical debt and reducing impact analysis time. You need documentation to be part of that statement of work. A big, bold statement there. Salesforce can't be managed by spreadsheets and hope. We need to up our game and make sure that customers understand that the things we're doing are for their own good. So some very practical next steps. There are some resources I've given you at the bottom there where you can go back and link and get to more content, which really supports everything we're talking about. But the actions. First of all, I suggest that you embed a formal org discovery health check into every engagement. Now, that may be as a free business development activity. We're certainly seeing some systems integrators do that, and that's the way they're winning work. And we're not talking about months of work. We're talking about maybe a week of work in a massive org to do that org discovery. But it needs to happen either before the implementation starts, before the proposal gets written, or certainly in the first phase of work you do with every engagement, number one. Number two, you need to educate those customers on the value of business analysis. The fact that because you're not building stuff doesn't mean you're not supporting, helping them get to the right answer more quickly. There's a concept called shift left. The earlier you find problems, the cheaper it is to fix them. 10 times cheaper to fix them in design than it is in production. And the last one, as I said, you need to include org documentation as a paid deliverable. You need to make sure that the customer values that documentation rather than, oh, give me the Excel spreadsheets and a couple of the specs as you leave, please. We need to see that documentation as a paid deliverable because it should be part of the history of the org. You wouldn't buy an expensive car without a service history. That service history is that org documentation. So again, some links there for that free org discovery process, the business process mapping course, and the 10 lessons. Now, a question I've always got here is that everyone goes, "Oh, we're a non-profit. We can't possibly afford this. None of our customers ever can." I'm not sure that's necessarily true. I wrote an article called "Free is Not Free." You need to understand the cost of using either free apps or Excel spreadsheets and the effort associated with it. As a consultant, things like Elements, I can't say for some of the other tools, but Elements is $500 per consultant per year. So you can provide that level of org discovery, that level of documentation for your customers on the project. That doesn't seem like an unreasonable ask for a customer when you think about the downstream benefits of it. I'm not suggesting you have to use Elements, but I am absolutely saying don't necessarily reach for free when free may be the more costly answer for the customer.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Ian. If anyone has any question, post. Still, we have 1 minute. You can post in the chatter, and we have a pool at the end. Chris, I think you needed to run the pool for me. I don't have access to it. Oh, okay.
The poll's already up.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the session. I have just one question. We have a few seconds. So getting the analogy of the car, right? So as you buy, you have the history. Same thing with Salesforce, but the car over time gets better, and the same as a Salesforce, right? So yeah. Have you seen things that make this process easier and that you can comment maybe in 30 seconds?
I think what makes it easier is, first of all, think about when I first started driving, I looked under the bonnet or the hood in your terms to try and understand what was happening. Now I drive into the garage and they plug it into a bunch of machines and it tells me what the problems are, number one. So that's the first thing. Salesforce is making those APIs more valuable. But secondly, we're tracking that history. The history of cars now, I can go to Carfax and Carfax will give me a history of all of the services. It's provided for me. No longer do I have to rely on the owner to remember to write in, oh, this service happened at this date and this is what happened. So I think leveraging the power of not just the APIs, but also it's easy to create and add that documentation means that our understanding about the org shouldn't be getting worse, it should be getting better. I'm glad you brought, that's a really nice article about the analogy of how cars have improved over time and how they've been easier to maintain and easier to drive.
That's your next idea for the next blog, right?
That's the next article. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much, Ian. And I hope you all enjoyed the session.
Brilliant. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.